Yeah, actually, talking about the levels, obviously for people who haven't bought into the game yet, or whatever, maybe you can explain a little bit about the masteries, because they're not your usual character class. It's not your usual character class. You know, pick a class, off you go. There's your skills, whatever. There is this crossover, which for me initially was kind of confusing. But you know, I wasn't. I'll admit, hands up, that I didn't play much Titan Quest. So for people who don't maybe know about it, can you just explain a little bit about that?
I mean, basically, you start off the game selecting one skill mastery, which is basically like a giant tree of skills. So most of the masteries have like 26 to 28 skills. And, you know, I think they're all pretty much around 336 total points that you can invest in them. And then those skills are usually divided up into a bunch of different trees with, you know, usually a few active skills, a bunch of passive skills, and then a bunch of modifiers that can change the way that the active skills work. Some masteries are built to be more actively oriented and others are more passively oriented because, you know, players seem to be kind of divided between that. Some people just love to bulk up on passive skills and focus on a couple main actives where they don't have to, you know, worry about having their hands on all the keys. And then other people, you know, like to go nuts with just a full, you know, hotkey bar full of active skills. So we try to cater to both crowds. And so basically, once you get to level 10, you're able to select another class mastery. So each mastery is basically like a theme. Like right now we have the soldier, who is kind of like the, you know, melee tankish character, although you can't actually play him ranged, or her. There's the demolitionist, which has a lot of explosive abilities. The occultist, which has the Hellhound and Raven Pet.
Yeah, see, that's what I've done. I've got my soldier crossed with an occultist, which makes for interesting playing. Put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the more favorable combinations on the forum right now, because basically you can build a pretty tanky character, but then, you know, the occultist has a lot of damage over time and some area effect spells that can help you break down mobs pretty quickly.
Yeah, I noticed. I noticed last night, actually, as that character's been leveling up, it's I find myself going back to the more sort of melee skills, away from a bit more from the occultist in the early levels.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I'll see how that pans out, but it's been quite fun mixing it up.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the interesting things about the mastery system is, you know, you can, I mean, first of all, it basically, in effect, gives us a much greater total number of classes because of all the different permutations that you can experiment with. But then also just within two masteries, like occultist or soldier, you can kind of decide to favor one mastery over another, either, you know, almost purely focusing on one mastery and then just borrowing a couple of support skills from the other one, or you can go with, you know, more of a hybrid character. So like with the occultist and soldier, I mean, you can really make a more of a tanky mage, or you can go, you know, more sort of melee, you know, with occultist damage support spells. I mean, there's a lot of options.
Okay, so have you in the office thought, okay, we unlock this extra mastery, and hey, let's give them 3. You know, how far can you push this?
We've thought about that, you know, before, and people have asked for it on the forums, you know, but part of the problem is, in terms of balance, there are certain skills certain types of skills that you need to kind of limit, you know, how many of them is a person able to get. And with the 2 masteries, we can at least ensure that, you know, like if a person has a damage buff, that they can only have 2 of them active at once. You know, adding in that option for a 3rd master, I think things would get pretty out of control.
Yeah, but you kind of know that when modding happens, you know, everything's
going to probably do it.
Yeah, it's going to go a bit nuts. Okay, one thing I want to talk about is a little bit about, now I'm maybe I am the typical ARPG player, maybe I'm not, but lore. Let's talk about the lore a little bit, because I know that when I play an ARPG game, I'm kind of interested in it for maybe 20 minutes or maybe 3 or 4 bits of dialogue, and then I kind of switch off, and all I want to do is get in there and just start smashing stuff. I mean, how are you handling that? I know there's in Grim. I keep saying Titan Quest. That's terrible. In Grim Dawn, obviously there is dialogue between you and the NPCs. How are you building on the lore for the game to try and make people actually get really engrossed in it and not have that switch off syndrome?
I mean, well, honestly, we're not trying to force people to be engrossed in it. I mean, there's different types of players out there, and some people naturally want to follow the lore. Other people, they just don't, and I think that it would be detrimental to their gameplay experience to force them to sit through dialogues or complete sort of side quests, flavor quests that they weren't really interested in. So and I'm kind of like, I think at either extreme at different times. I mean, a lot of times, especially when I first play a game, I just want to get into the action and run out into the world and ignore the NPCs and go kill stuff. And I think that's one of the things that was really great about Diablo 2. I mean, in some ways the game was just so easy to play because, you weren't required to jump through a lot of hoops to get into the action.
But in that case, though, Arthur, the kind of story was told without you having to pay too much attention to it. And I guess that's my point, is that there are ways to tell a story within the gameplay itself and who you meet and who you encounter. I mean, is that something that you're looking at when you're putting the each act together and each quest together and so on?
I mean, we are to some extent. I mean, we do try to tell a lot of story through the world, in terms of the atmosphere, visually sort of evidence that you can see of what took place in the world. And I think that in just going through the game, I mean, you do get sort of a gleaning of what the story is and what's been happening in the world. And I think that's similar to Diablo 2. I mean, I think to some extent, you probably have a better understanding of Diablo 2 because of the amount of time that you've played it than you would if you were just a first-time player who was running through it. I mean, in reality, if you don't talk to any of the NPCs, I mean, you can basically bypass all of the quests in Act 1. I mean, the only quest you needed to complete was to kill Endariel. So if you just do that, if you just run through the game and you don't talk to the NPCs and you don't get any of the quests, you don't rescue Cain, you don't sort of hear his backstory, you don't hear about the sisterhood, the monastery being taken over. You can pretty much, for the most part, ignore almost all of the story. And that's what I did, I guess, for a long time playing Diablo 2. And it was, after a while, I was like, I wonder what's going on with the story here. And I actually sat through it and listened to all of the dialogue. And so, I mean, there's sort of different levels of involvement. If you want to get involved in the story, there's a tremendous amount of lore there, and we're trying to offer that too. I mean, we've basically put in lots of journals that you can find in the game, and we hope to build on that as we move forward and kind of enhance the system for it, which is a little bit clunky right now. But basically, we want to put a lot of lore in there for people to find. We want to put in kind of evidence, visual evidence of what's been happening in the world, and then of course there's the NPC dialogue. But I mean, similar to Diablo 2, we give people the freedom to basically ignore all of that stuff if they want. I mean, you can just run out of town and start killing stuff and find your way into the burial cave and kill the reanimator and go back and get the quest credit for it without ever having talked to the NPCs.
Is that something that's evolving as you're developing it right now? Are you thinking, well, it'd be cool to add this piece into the story? I mean, obviously you've got a rough idea of what where the story starts from A to to the end point, but is that something that's changing, evolving for you as you go along?
I mean, very much so. I mean, in fact, for build 16, we're actually putting 2 new quests into the starting area that provide a little bit more kind of flavor and backstory for the world, and support kind of the evidence of what's been happening in the world. And at various times, like a couple of builds ago, we inserted more lore items for people to find, and I think we'll just keep doing more of that as we go forward. So, on one hand, we're trying to build forward and get Act Two done, but on the other hand, whenever we do have a good idea of for an additional story element that could fit into the beginning of the game, we'll go back and do that.
Actually, it's the way games are being developed right now, and I know that Path of Exile is another one that has kind of been developed incrementally, with new acts being released incrementally as the game is actually available to the public. It's kind of also apparent in that some of the early levels could do with a bit of work. Is that something that you are going to be continuously going back to, revisiting when you've done Act 1, 2, 3, 4, going back and souping up things in Act 1?
Yeah, it's funny because to some extent we try not to too much, because we really do want to just, make progress with the game and sort of at least get a first pass of the whole game done before we go back and do a lot of rework. But, at the same time, I'm, I guess a little bit of a perfectionist, and, I have unfinished business with Act 1, and it's like as you move forward, there's always things that you wish you could have done but you didn't have time to do, or you didn't have the technology at that point to do it. And then over the course of development, as like new quest features get added in, or randomization features or whatnot, you want to kind of proliferate those throughout the previous sections of the game. So I think at this point, we do occasionally kind of touch up the beginning of the game a little bit, but we're mostly trying to move forward. And I think once we get further in the game, once we kind of do a first pass of everything, definitely we'll go back and spend some more time kind of buffing up the beginning of the game.
So right now, I mean, how many are you in the team right now? You mentioned the number 6 earlier. Are you looking to expand that? I mean, what's happening for Crate? Looking at as the game starts developing further.
I would love to expand that, but really it's all about funding. And right now, even with the release on early access, and that's brought in a bunch of additional funding. Although, I'm kind of waiting until we actually get the payment, and then, have to pay our end of the year taxes before I can really get an idea of how much we actually have to use going forward. But with all of the game studios going out of business, in past years, especially in Massachusetts, we're very focused on staying alive, because obviously you can't make a game if, you don't have a studio. So, we're really trying to balance, our desire to bring more people onto the team and expand our capacity with our desire to basically stay alive as a studio. And until we have, I guess, kind of a bigger windfall, we won't be able to really dramatically expand what we're doing.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but looking back on it now, do you think it was absolutely the right decision for you to push this and develop it independently as a small team?
Yeah, I do. The thing is as hard as it is, I just don't see, sort of publisher involvement as an option. Especially earlier on. We did talk to some publishers, and we got to the point of basically looking over contracts, and the reality is the business model there is just so brutal that I don't feel like it would be sustainable. Not only is there not a lot of reward for the developer, but it also puts you in a very precarious position where you get enough money to kind of start up faster and assemble a team and put the game together more quickly. But at the end of development, you have basically incurred a large burn rate with all of the people that you've taken on. And once you put the game out, your funding stops, essentially. You no longer are receiving payments from the publisher. You're just basically losing money. So at that critical point, which is the point at which a lot of companies, fold. That's basically where Iron Lore went under. They finished development on Immortal Throne, and the game went out, and they basically aren't earning any revenue. So you have to line up the next project quickly. If you can't line up the next project quickly enough, then you're out of business. But I mean, beyond that, it also sort of de-incentivizes you from wanting to continue to work on that project and support it, because you're not basically earning any of the reward for doing so. And in some cases, you actually can't, because the publisher controls the IP, and so you basically have to get permission whenever you want to release a patch or do anything. And we didn't want to end up in that situation. So this is kind of an all or nothing, where we're out here basically scraping by, trying to do this on our own. And if we are successful, then we'll be in a very good position where we own our IP, we can continue supporting it and developing it and releasing content for it, and we'll directly benefit from that. And if we don't, then we'll be no better off, or no worse off than we would be had we signed a publisher deal and not been able to jump onto that next project.
I forgot to ask you earlier, actually, and this is to do with future content, which is obviously the multiplayer, which is something that I'm desperate to see.
Yeah.
How far off are you on that now?
Pretty close. I would have said that it'd be out by now had you asked me a couple months ago, but there have just been some lingering, sort of difficult to squash technical issues. We've gotten through a couple of them, and it's actually, we're able to connect now and play for a little bit, but there's still some bugs that are basically the result of fundamental changes that we've made to the engine since we inherited it from Titan Quest. Basically, our changes to the pathing system and the way that things spawn and factions and whatnot. So we've gotten through most of the major bugs, and I would say that, and I'll probably be wrong, but I would say there's a good chance it could roll out in the next 2 months.
Okay, so not too far then. Well, look, we've weathered long enough, so this is your opportunity really to, tell anyone who hasn't discovered Grim Dawn yet why they should be playing Grim Dawn, why they should go and pick it up on Steam.
Well, I'm pretty biased, but I don't know.
Really?
Really? I think if you're a fan of the action RPG genre, then I think most people want to play everything that's out there, and I think Grim Dawn is a really solid contender. I think we have very responsive, fun, core gameplay and complex systems, and the game is just continuing to unfold. Initially we were supposed to deliver something like, I don't know, I think we said like 3 to 5 hours for Act 1, and some people are blowing through it in 6 or 8 hours, but a lot of people are spending 10 or 20 hours to go through it. And there's so much replayability. Just if you go onto the forum, we have one thread that's how many hours have you put into Grim Dawn so far, and I think that thread pretty much speaks for the game. You go through it, and there are people who've put in hundreds of hours, in some cases over 1,000 hours just playing Act 1 of Alpha. So I don't know what's a better sales pitch than that.
Okay, well, Arthur Bruno, CEO of Create Entertainment. I know you love that title. We talked about that before.
It's weird when somebody calls you CEO of a 6-person company, but I guess technically that's true.
Okay, well, look, thanks a lot for your time, and we'll be back in the game soon. And do pick it up if you guys haven't checked it out. Do check it out. It's on Steam and it's Grim Dawn.
All right, well, it's been great talking to you, and hope I can get more of your feedback.
Okay, thanks a lot, Arthur. Cheers.
Take care.